Okay, welcome to another episode of my fledgling podcast show in which I talk about games. Initially, I planned to talk about a different game or series with each episode, but I've had such an enjoyable experience replaying Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, and it's such a landmark game, and it's one of the favorite games of my late friend who had inspired this series. I'm gonna spend more time talking about San Andreas. So I've finished replaying it. I played it throughout the month of September. 26 hours of recorded time later. In reality, it's closer to about 30 hours for various reasons. And I can honestly say that I've enjoyed replaying this game more than I had originally playing it. As I've mentioned, I'm not really a fan of the series. I appreciate it, but I'm not a fanboy. I'm not one of those people who plays this game every year or watches countless San Andreas videos, but I appreciate the design of the game, its impact. And I can say that it's timeless. It's dated. It's certainly not a perfect game, but it is enjoyable. I would recommend it for anybody who is willing to overcome its flaws. I'm going to spend a little bit of time outlining those playability issues that I've encountered, and that I'm sure that other people will have issues with. Starting with the camera, it took a while for me to realize how to reset or center the camera. On foot, if you press the view stats button, the camera will switch to the default view behind CJ. And in a vehicle, if you press the look left and look right button at the same time to look behind you and then let go, then the camera will reset to the default vehicle view. But the game doesn't explain that. It really should describe that, and that's another issue that I have. The control layout in the pause screen, I hate how it like flashes. Like there's a lot of information that it has to convey, but instead of letting the player scroll through pages, for example, it just automatically switches between one set and the other in vehicle, on foot, and like the continued section. I find that annoying. Overall, the play of like the onboarding it's decent. The game introducing controls and systems to you, but that leaves a lot to be desired. And the turning speed, for me, it's jarring. There's no way to adjust how quickly the camera turns. I know that's more of a modern convention, but it really hinders my experience initially. Now, I played the HD version released several years ago. That is a port of the mobile versions. I didn't play the HD trilogy version. So besides the turning speed, you can invert the controls, but you can't independently invert the horizontal and vertical look. It's both or neither. The driving, of course, is a major component of any Grand Theft Auto game. The technical limitations really hinder the experience. The draw distance is not so great. A lot of pop-in of objects. The camera is annoying. It sits low and it turns slow. And that, I'm not the only person who's had issue with that, and that really hinders the experience, because while you're in a car, you can't really see too far. You can't see the area directly in front of the car. And when turning, the camera is slow to catch up, so you either have to press the look left and look right button as you're turning, which is difficult to do, or you have to manually turn the camera around in the direction of the intended turn before the car turns. Otherwise, the car is just turning and there's obstacles like incoming traffic appearing from off screen. I don't know how the modern GTA games do it, but I would like a camera that sits above the vehicle that lets you see in front of it as well as down the road, and if you turn, the camera pivots automatically and quickly so that you can see the direction that you intend to go as well as the direction that you're facing at the time. That would be great. There's probably mods that do it, but that should be the default. Also, the mini-map is not optimally useful. You can set way markers, but there's no distance or direction. I know that the HD versions have a GPS style indicator, like the route is highlighted. I found myself pausing often to set a waypoint and then set a closer waypoint just because navigating was difficult for me. Tricky, wouldn't say difficult, but it was not the smoothest experience. As I mentioned earlier, onboarding is something that the game doesn't do very well. It does adequately. Like handbraking, I must have played like probably 15 hours before I realized how you could do emergency braking, handbraking to power slide. The combat, weapon proficiency, that's something that I hadn't remembered, being able to increase your skill with different weapons. I would say it does incentivize using different weapons to try to max out your skills. One thing that's annoying is the zoom direction. It takes a while to get used to, but when you press the zoom, the aim button, the camera zooms in based on the direction that CJ is facing, not the direction that the camera is facing. It's very counterintuitive, and I would be sure to point that out to anybody who's intending to play this game. Maybe modern versions have mods or settings that let you choose between zooming style, whether it's the character direction or the camera direction, the initial camera direction. The weapon cycling is annoying. I understand that the HD trilogy has a selection wheel, and I know that the modern GTA games have that. I am kind of complaining about a port of a 20-year-old game. It's easy to take for granted, but if you're gonna play the original version, be mindful of these, outdated design choices. Crouching is useful. I don't remember doing that in my initial playthrough, but one thing that's kind of annoying is that CJ can't crouch if he's holding items that aren't weapons. So as you're cycling through in the heat of battle, getting shot at, low on health, and you can't crouch because CJ's holding a camera, for example. The shoulder view, again, I've complained about it before, but not being able to switch shoulders while you're in aiming mode. You can't even do that in the modern GTA games. Hopefully that will be in GTA 6. The instructions, the brief menu. It's useful. It gives you a summary of what's been displayed on screen in terms of instructions, but I found that out on my own. The game doesn't introduce that to you. Certain instructions are not clear or they're not specific enough, like the flight school objectives, instructions for the Hydra, toggling between vertical and horizontal flight. I had to look that up, and I'll be honest, I was on the one hand kind of annoyed, but on the other hand a bit relieved that I wasn't the only person who had confusion with these parts. The map icons, the game doesn't really specify which missions are critical and which ones are non-critical. Again, I haven't played this game in years. Probably last time I played this game was probably close to 20 years ago on the Xbox version. So it was only after just browsing online that I learned that certain missions were not critical for story progression. So something like some kind of visual communication on the mini-map would be helpful. And there's one point in the game in which I didn't know what to do. I didn't know which point on the map led to the necessary mission. It was the flight school. The icon was just a plane instead of a letter. They could have been more consistent. So maybe required story missions could have a letter or initials, or maybe like a textual character, maybe a question mark even, in white with the black outline. Optional story missions could be, I don't know, black with the white outline. Or maybe, I think black text with the white outline is more prominent, but just something to visually distinguish which missions are critical and which ones are optional. That would have been helpful. The missions, the mission design, the style of going to a spot, talking to a mission giver, getting context for the mission, then going to do that mission. I don't know if that will work in modern gaming. I think maybe incorporating social media and smartphones, just maybe having like a list that you can choose diegetically, like a gig website or text. I think that's how they do it in the modern games. But it makes sense for this type of game, the setting in which it takes place. Social media and smartphones are not widespread. You would still have to physically go to a place and communicate in person. Some of the missions, the infamous missions, wrong side of the tracks. It took a while for me to figure. I almost beat it on my second try, but I had to fail several times before I realized that you've got to create some distance. I think a lot of people overestimate the game's AI being able to compensate for, compensate and then shoot at the necessary angle to kill those guys on top of that train. I realized that you just gotta create enough distance, and then once I did that, I finished it with like no issue at all. The supply lines, I know everyone hates that mission. Again, I almost completed it on my second try, but then I just kept failing over and over again. I know that the initial release of the game had limited fuel, and Rockstar made adjustments for the second wave of releases to give more fuel. It's another instance of the game not really communicating important information in a clear and complete way. If you glide, you don't expend fuel, and I learned that if you move backwards on the ground, that doesn't expend fuel either. And I found the best strategy was to just treat the plane like a mobile turret, locating the couriers and just shooting them. If I were to design this mission, what I would have done is I would have just removed that one courier that is a pair of people on a motorcycle. That one courier is so difficult because the passenger can shoot is on the back. They're not driving, so they can shoot down the plane from any direction you approach. I would have just, to make things easier for everybody, I would have just made all the couriers those cube vans. They're big, slow targets. They're easier to hit. I must have spent hours on that mission. And yeah, end of the line. Okay, that was pretty epic, but I had to play it 3 times. My 3rd time was the charm, but it's such a long mission. Something like that would never fly today, right? Any developer worth their weight in salt would have had checkpoints or split that long mission into a series of missions to give you a chance to save, heal, restock. But overall, those are my main complaints. Otherwise, it was great. I enjoyed it. I appreciate the version that I played actually had like a fast travel element. Not a fast travel, but a skip the beginning of the mission if you've already done that. But I realized that in the long run, it's more effective, less annoying to just save after every mission. And if you die or fail, just load up that save. It's too much of a hassle to go from the hospital if you get wasted, or from the police station if you get busted, to travel back to your base, restock, then go back to the start of the mission that caused you to fail. In a way, I'm kind of glad that I experienced all of these pain points, because it really makes me appreciate the modern conveniences, the ease of use features that games these days have. I'm not going to call them quality of life. I don't really like that term. I don't think it's appropriate to apply to video games, but features, choices that most people call quality of life features, ease of use, playability, time savers, like checkpoints, fast travel, restarts. Maybe one thing the Grand Theft Auto series could use is on-demand services. Instead of going to stores at fixed locations, maybe like a pop-up shop or a courier service. That would actually reflect the reality of today, and hopefully maybe Grand Theft Auto 6 implements that. In terms of my experience, yeah, great cinematic experience. Just watching the cutscenes. I appreciate the style, the different shots. Despite the limited primitive graphics, the cutscenes are engaging, just the way they're presented. You can tell that the creators have an appreciation and understanding of filmmaking, visual storytelling. And one thing that I appreciate about this game and the series in general is that there's cinematic moments that emerge during gameplay. So it's not just the cutscenes, it's the moment-to-moment gameplay in which the player is almost like the director themselves through choices and chance. So for example, the player can choose to play a certain radio station, and just through chance, the randomization of the playlist, the weather, the time of day, events that unfold seemingly out of random can create these cool moments, like, you know, just riding a dirt bike in this dusty quarry, and at the same time a dust storm appears while on the radio a song by Hank Williams plays. It just reminds me of the Fallout series. Or maybe you're helping OG Loke track down his former lover in jail. At the same time, a love song by the Ali Brothers plays. It's hilariously ironic. It's just so cool. It's like I had a part in creating this sequence that could be a show or a movie on its own. I think that is really one of the pillars of the Grand Theft Auto experience in general. The world building, of course, the radio stations. I didn't really appreciate how much it adds to the world building. Just going through the cast, Axl Rose, Michael Bivins, Chuck D, George Clinton, they're all recording artists who play DJs in this game, and they all have songs in this game. Axl Rose is the only one who plays a DJ for a channel that doesn't have his song. He's the DJ of the classic radio station, whereas the Guns N' Roses song is on the Gen X, the alternative radio station, but they're all great. One thing that sets this game apart from something like Mafia 3, which I'll touch on briefly, is that the missions really give the illusion of variety. Like, as I was playing this game, I thought, the driving isn't as great, the combat isn't as great, even though they're several years apart. And Mafia 3 is so far ahead in those areas. Grand Theft Auto San Andreas is more enjoyable because it doesn't seem as repetitive as Mafia 3. So if you haven't played Mafia 3, the story missions are epic, but to get to those story missions, you've got to do the same activity. You got to do the same killing, collecting, and so on. But Grand Theft Auto 3 really provides different contexts, even though in the end you're also doing the same limited set of activities, going to point A to point B, killing people, collecting these things, trailing people, but it keeps it engaging, and the missions aren't too long, so it's addicting. I had that, I'm just gonna play one more mission, and then I realized I've been playing for 2-3 hours. I usually don't play games for that long anymore. But I will say Mafia 3 to this day has the most satisfying driving that I've experienced in the video game, especially if you're on simulation mode and you can actually switch shoulders. Those are things that you can't do in the Grand Theft Auto games. I think that's something Grand Theft Auto can take from the Mafia series. I know there's a new Mafia game on the horizon. Definitely the latter takes inspiration from the Grand Theft Auto series with its radio stations. It's not as overtly satirical. Like the commercials in Grand Theft Auto 3 are really tongue-in-cheek, on the nose, but they're always funny. The plot for Grand Theft Auto 3, it's memorable. Even though I haven't played it in decades, I still remembered the main story beats. The shift, I'm gonna kind of spoil it. That shift maybe about a third of the way through, which Sweet gets arrested, CJ gets exiled to the countryside. It was just so exciting. Just that dramatic shift. It's a brilliant move from the creators, the storytellers. It makes it interesting, but it also opens up a whole new possibility, because at that point you've been experiencing the same settings, music, and so on for several hours. But I will say at that point, my enjoyment started to wane a bit, right? The weakness, just the driving and the navigation, the confusing map, it really started to rear its ugly head. It was more prominent in this part of the game, which is unfortunate. Another thing that kind of surprised me is just the history, the real life history reflected in this game. I wasn't expecting reference to real life figures like Mikhail Gorbachev or Margaret Thatcher. They're just mentioned in passing. There's also Crash. I didn't realize that was a real group, the Community Resources Against Street Hoodlums. And like in this game, Crash had a notorious reputation for being corrupt. And I also hadn't expected the crack epidemic to be so prevalent in the story. Now, the game kind of leans into the theory that the government, the CIA, had been responsible for facilitating the crack epidemic in order to fund clandestine activities. I just did some cursory research. I couldn't find any evidence one way or the other, but just that real life drama or speculation being in this game. I would say San Andreas is more closer to life than the other Grand Theft Auto games, in that it's so tied to a specific era. It's not just cosmetic, it's actually reflective of major events, and also, of course, references to the Cold War ending, the Berlin Wall. It really goes deep into that 1992 time setting. There's actually more nuance than I had expected. Tenpenny is, of course, corrupt, but I like how he calls out the futility of so-called gang loyalty. He calls it bullshit when he arrests CJ and takes him to the countryside. And Smoke, again, spoiler, he's the villain. He's betrayed, quote unquote, betrayed the Grove Street families, but he's also, in a way, like crack dealing aside, he's more enlightened when it comes to working with other groups, right? Crossing boundaries across gangs, across citizens and police, right? If he hadn't been a crack dealer, instead worked to better the community through development without engaging in illegal activities, he would be the hero. He would be maybe a saint, even, or close to a saint, something like a saint figure. Yeah, that's great. And CJ is a sympathetic protagonist, but he's no angel. He kills people. He kind of goes into that. He's not so much as Smoke, but he's really into that gang lifestyle initially. Toward the end, he pulls away, and that's the direct trajectory that he always would have been on, which is apparent from the game. The fact that he's been in self-imposed exile for 5 years. That's the plot. Great. And that final mission, it's fitting. Just the dramatic fire truck going over that bridge, landing in that cul-de-sac in front of their house. At first, I wasn't really paying attention. My first or second attempt at that mission, but after rewatching it, it's like, oh, okay. That's why they put that bridge there. It's a visual landmark to let you know you're home, but it's also down the road. The place of the dramatic conclusion of the story. Great story. Yeah, so it was written by one of the Hauser brothers. I think both of the Hauser brothers. Let me just see here. San Andreas. Check it out. Written by Dan Hauser, James Worrell, and DJ Pooh, who also wrote Friday with Ice Cube. And I just finished watching Straight Outta Compton. I was thinking of watching Boys in the Hood and Menace to Society, but they seem a bit dated to me. I know they've informed the setting and the story and the tone of this game, but Straight Outta Compton is a more real version of that. Yeah, definitely Ice Cube, Dr. Dre, Eazy-E, NWA. They're well represented on the Radio Los Santos station. I've never really been a big fan of Gangsta-Rap, but hearing in this game, I found myself just bobbing my head. Like, props to the music director. Like, picking great songs that are enjoyable, and they're also immersive. I don't use that word very often, but that's the case. In terms of possibilities, just playing this game, I couldn't help but think ahead and think how other games in the series, or just other games in general, can expand upon the systems introduced in this game, like the territory system. So in San Andreas, the gang system is introduced later in the game than I had thought, but taking territories grants you perks like cash, a steady cash flow that you can pick up. And it's a very tug of war system. As a player, it is annoying to have to constantly retake hoods that you've already taken, but I would argue it reflects the broader theme, one of the themes of this game, of how the gang life, gang warfare, beef, rivalries, it's futile. It's never ending. So that works. So the way it could work, that perk system, that tug of war system I did mention in my prior video, but it's a way for the game to seem more alive, because it gives the sense that things are happening outside of the immediate perception of the player. And there can be pros and cons. They can be major, they can be minor. So let's say in Grand Theft Auto 6, if you gain notoriety, popularity on social media, you would attain influencer status. Maybe you get discounts at stores. Maybe you get access to clubs, whereas other people have to wait in line, for example. And then the opposite could happen. Maybe you go to places where you're not popular, or you're not welcome, so you don't get access to services and products. I think that would be really cool. I just want to see something more like that. Less huge open worlds that seem to be filled with extras, and more tighter places where there's more obvious and immediate impact, the push and pull of my actions as a player and the actions of non-player characters. Yeah, so I played through this game, and at the same time I just so happened to start rewatching Entourage, one of my all-time favorite shows. I've seen it several times, probably closer to a dozen times at this point, but I started watching it again, and it first aired in 2004, the same year that San Andreas was released. And I don't know if the two pieces of media had the same casting directors, music directors, but there was a lot of overlap between the two works. So as I was really getting into my playthrough with San Andreas. I was probably going through maybe the second or third season of Entourage. I'm still going through that show. I'm only about halfway. I've kind of slowed down my watching of that show after beating San Andreas, but Chris Penn and James Woods, they both play important supporting roles in San Andreas, and they both make appearances in season 2 and season 3 of Entourage. Debbie Mazzara makes a cameo in this game. She's prominent in Grand Theft Auto 3. She's in Entourage, prominent in the first couple of seasons. Gary Busey has a recurring role. He doesn't appear in San Andreas, but he plays a memorable character in Vice City and Grand Theft Auto 3. William Fichtner, he's in the later season of Entourage that I haven't got to again at this point, but he plays Ken Rosenberg, that memorable lawyer. One thing that I hadn't expected is the same songs, several songs appearing in San Andreas and Entourage. So Eminence Front by The Who, Hood Took Me Under by Compton's Most Wanted. Those songs were in the first couple of seasons. There's also Children's Story by Slick Rick, Jungle Fever by the Chakachas. Just hearing those games, sitting out at random and hearing those songs in San Andreas, I instantly recall hearing them in Entourage. It's been a great nostalgic trip. And it's not just Entourage, there's Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels and Snatch. They're both movies directed by Guy Ritchie. Payback by James Brown and Fool's Gold by the Stone Roses appears in Lock, Stock. Cross the Tracks by Maceo and the Max. That plays whenever you enter one of the casinos in Las Venturas. There's also Hot Pants by Bobby Bird. Those two songs are on the Snatch soundtrack. The Hauser brothers are British American, and I'm absolutely certain that they've seen these two movies. Lock, Stock is from like 1998. Snatch is from 2000. Those movies have no doubt informed the soundtrack of San Andreas. There's also The Sopranos that first started airing in 1999. The late Frank Vincent plays the mob boss, I think Salvatore Leone. There's also Chris Tardio, who plays a minor character. In the second season of The Sopranos, he plays the guy whom CJ terrorizes. So my favorite shows and movies from that era, from the era of San Andreas, have a lot of, I guess you would call cross-pollination with this game. And I bring them up because I realize that the reason I like these shows and movies is that there's a crew, that sense of camaraderie. Entourage is about, in case you don't know, a movie star and his manager, chauffeur, their brother, his best friends, his brothers from different mothers. Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, same thing. It's a crew of 4. Snatch, it's more of a crew of 2. The Sopranos, it's a mafia crew, but if I were a creative director of the next Grand Theft Auto game after Grand Theft Auto 6, I would want it to be like focusing on a crew of people who are already together, unlike Grand Theft Auto 5, in which Franklin, Michael, and Trevor come together over the course of the story. And they're more like, their camaraderie is tenuous because I know in one of the endings, spoiler, that you can kill one, both, or all of them. We can kill one of them. I wouldn't really want that in my Grand Theft Auto game. I would want maybe the loyalty of the crew to get tested I wouldn't want them to like kill each other. Maybe at risk of being killed by others. But that crew mentality, it would, you know, enable co-op play if players want. I like the idea of a group of close-knit characters, protagonists, having different skills, personalities, working together to do missions. I don't know if I really want to play as borderline psychopaths like Trevor. Maybe just your average people who just get caught up in trouble and they just try to make their way out of it. That would be my ideal Grand Theft Auto game. I don't know how many more Grand Theft Auto games will release in my lifetime. At the rate that Rockstar releases them, I think after 6, maybe 2, maybe 3 more Grand Theft Auto games. I don't know if I would play San Andreas again. Like I said, I'm not one of those people who loves it so much that I play it every year or every other year. If I never play this game again, that's okay with me. Maybe I'll wait for a really polished remake. Maybe I'll only play San Andreas again one more time regardless. I've really enjoyed it. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. Great game. Play it.